Here's one of my favorite New Yankee Workshop projects. We call it a dower chest, and it was inspired by an antique that we found at the Winterthur Museum in Delaware. As with a lot of these chests, the corners are joined with through dovetails. Now here's a sample of such a joint. This is known as the tailboard, and as you can see, these pieces are shaped like a dove's tail, therefore the name. This is the pin board, and the pins fit in between the tails. It's a strong joint all on its own, but you add glue and it's extremely strong. I'll show you how to make one. To begin forming through dovetails, I refer to the on-board instructions, and it calls for me to cut the tails first. So I'm going to remove this stabilizer bar for the moment and get my first piece of stock, which I've labeled as the tailboard, and I'm showing this as the outside. Further reference to the instructions call for the outside surface of the tailboard to face the jig. So I'm going to turn this board around, put the outside face against the jig, against this side stop, and just below the fingers, and lock it off with this single lever clamp, which I really like. Now I'm going to take another piece of stock of the same thickness as the tailboard, slide it under the top clamp and against the tailboard, and that will prevent tear out later. I want to take another piece of stock of the same thickness and slide it on this end, lock those in place, and that will make the fingers parallel to the jig later. Now I want to adjust the fingers for the layout. I slide them over so that this joint between the two parts of the finger is about 1/8 of an inch inside the edge of that tailboard, and tighten the screws. Now I come down the other end, do the same thing, tighten these screws, and then I can deal with the intermediate fingers. Now I can space them by eye, which is kind of nice, or I could very accurately measure them and lock those in place. And that will give me 2 full pins in the center, and the half pins will be on the edge. Now I want to drop the fingers down tight onto that sacrificial board and lock that off. I want to make sure that the fingers are tight against the stops, lock that off. Then I want to double check my tailboard and make sure that it's tight to the fingers and tight against the side stop. Set that. Now I can take my stabilizer bar, set it back in place, and we're ready to set up a router. Referring to my recipe guide, when using 3/4 inch stock, I need a D4 dovetail bit and a G1 template guide. So here's the bit, here's the guide. I also need an O-ring and a nut. So I take the guide and drop it into the bottom of the router base. Now this O-ring will prevent the guide from loosening up while routing. And now the nut. Okay, just snug that down hand tight, and I'm ready for the bit. I like to set the bit in the collet, bottom it out, and then bring it up just a little bit, and we'll tighten it down. Now I don't need to torque this too much, just enough to snug up that collet. That's good. Now I can reassemble the router. To set the depth of the bit, I'm not going to use these. I'm going to use these posts at the left-hand side of the jig, and they're for through dovetails only. But the procedure is the same. I just bring that bit down to the top of the post and lock it off. Now, before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now a little bit about procedure. With this type of tool, I want to make sure that the router is set in place before I turn it on and that it's totally powered down before I remove it. Otherwise, I might damage the tool and the bit. Now I want to concentrate on where the material is going to be removed. I want to run the bit and the guide through these slots only, leaving behind this material. Now let's see how we did. Looks pretty good. Now I want to remove the stabilizer bar. Set that aside for a minute. Take the fingers and flip them over. Push them up against the stops again right here and lock that down. Now I have my pin board right here. I've labeled it outside pin board. Once again, referring to the onboard instructions, it says the outside surface of the pin board should face out this time. So we'll slip it back under the clamp, against the side stop, and against the fingers, and lock it down. Now I can reinstall the stabilizer bar. Okay. The next operation calls for a bit change. Referring to the recipe sheet, to cut the pins, I need an S2 bit, which is a straight cutting bit. And I've changed out the guide to a G2. Now, once again, I go to my handy depth adjustment guide and lower it down on top of that post. Lock it off. To form the pins, I'm removing the material between these fingers. And I want to come in and remove a little bit from left to right, sort of in a circular motion. That way I'm working against the rotation of the bit. Well, this is always the moment of truth. Let's see how we did. Move the pin board, grab our tail board. We want the outside of the pin board there, the outside of the tail board here. Slide them together. Fits pretty good. So does that. Now, if the joint was too tight or too loose, it's easy to take care of that. Following the directions, I loosen this nut right here and move the stop in or out as needed to make the joint fit perfectly. The 24-inch Omnijig system comes with everything you need to make through dovetails just like the ones you've seen on the Dower chest. If you want to make narrow pin dovetails, which might be more historically accurate, all you need to do is add a bit and a set of stops to your collection.